Welcome back, mystery renters. We are at Bunker 322, Southern Alliance Compound. This will be doing a part 2 of the movie review Loose Change that came out in 2005. The purpose of this is to show the anomalies of the original 9/11 story not adding up. This is not yet something to place blame, but merely highlight the inconsistencies. Unfortunately, tonight, MJ1 will not be here as we had originally intended to do this together. But with technical difficulties, it was not going to work, and we thought that this information should be put out in time for the anniversary. Thank you. Enjoy. But first things first. We have listener mail. Let's see what we got here. MJ1 and MJ2, hello. My name is Emmett, and I watch every single MRI show, and I own all your t-shirts off your website. And my favorite one is the UFO abducting the guy, and it says, "Don't take me, bro." That's one of my favorites also. How come y'all always in bunkers and gun ranges and in the woods shooting stuff and always solving mysteries? And when I grow up, I want to join your constitutionally legal paramilitary organization and be MJ3 also. Thank you, Emmett. Oh, that hit me. We appreciate all our listeners and all our young fans out there, and yeah, Emmett, that sounds great. I think that's a good idea. You can be MJ3 too if you want to, buddy. Alright. We left off with Dick Cheney swiveling his head around and saying, "Doesn't the order still stand? Have you heard anything to the contrary?" Talking about shooting down, I want to say it was Flight 77 going into the Pentagon. So this is where Loose Change picks up here. They start with the story of the Pentagon. So 9:37 a.m. Flight 77 crashes into the ground floor of the Pentagon. Within 24 hours, all videos have been confiscated. March the 7th, 2002, 5 frames from a guard shack released. I'm sure everybody's seen those if they've seen anything on any kind of documentaries or whatever concerning 9/11. October 14th, 2004. Freedom of Information got a CD-ROM of 2 time-lapse recordings released March 16th, 2006. A Citgo video released September 15th, 2006. And the Doubletree Hotel video December 7th, 2006. The agent in charge of the Freedom of Information said FBI had 85 different tapes. So the official story is Hangor enters U.S. in 1996 to become an airline pilot. He would not complete even one single course. He was considered by instructors a waste of time, had only the barest understanding of what instruments were on the airplane and what they were there to do. He obtained a commercial pilot license in '99, but how and where remains a mystery that the FAA will still not disclose. He had trouble controlling and landing a single-engine Cessna. But 9/11 Commission concludes Hangor was the most experienced and highly trained pilot out of all the hijackers. But for instance, Flight 93 hijacker Ziad Jarrah was actually an ex-Saudi fighter pilot. So, Haji Hangor had spent weeks before 9/11 at the Valencia Motel 6 miles away from the NSA. All 5 of these hijackers on Flight 77 set off the metal detectors and have additional screening. All 5 are allowed to board Flight 77. Here's some interesting statistics. The plane is 33% filled. These right here are the equivalent to an air taxi. And these flights are filled months in advance. And for this to be a 33% filled capacity plane is a big anomaly. It's very weird. So who was on this plane? It's not your run-of-the-mill American. So passengers are Barbara Olson. She was actually going to be interviewed on a politically incorrect show. So there were CEOs of Raytheon, Boeing, Department of Defense, intelligence agencies, high-ranking officers of the U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force, CEOs of Lockheed Martin, high executives from American Airlines itself, and a few more government agencies. The pilots were Captain Charles Burlygate. He was a graduate of the Naval Academy and graduated from Top Gun School. He developed anti-terror strategies at the Pentagon in '89. He was active in the reserves until 1996. His Boeing 757 would be crashed into the very section of the Pentagon where he worked. The plane hijackers, they hijacked it 33 minutes into the flight. And for the next 44 minutes, it coasted into its flight path with no military intervention. So this is unusual. It's 33%. It's 33% filled to capacity. These are Wikipedia numbers. So 33 minutes into the flight, it's hijacked. 44 minutes. It's 33 and 44. That's 77. This is flight 77. These are some numerical anomalies. To inflict maximum damage, it should have continued its trajectory and nosed down into the center of the Pentagon. Instead, he performs a 330-degree turn while dropping 7,000 feet at close to 500 miles per hour, never checking up, supposedly, according to radar. He executed a maneuver described by experienced pilots as absolutely ludicrous and impossible, and that would require professional expertise. And they even mentioned that just your standard run-of-the-mill 757 structurally could not even attempt this maneuver without it just bursting in the air from the G-forces and whatnot. But this amateur pilot was considered a waste of time and resources by instructors and could not even control a single-engine Cessna. Was able to conduct this stunt with a 757 at 500 miles per hour. He was doing stuff in this 757 that the radar operators actually thought was a scrambled Langley military aircraft, jet fighter. So Flight 77 will be flying solo. It took out 5 light poles, a tree, a street camera, an emergency diesel generator, a perimeter fence, and it managed to hit the only part of the Pentagon that had been reinforced for just this type of an event. The improvements were reinforced steel, blast-proof Kevlar windows, 1.5-inch thick. The renovation had began in 1991, was only days away from completion, so it was 99% done, I'd say. This is on, if this is the Pentagon right here, this was the one wall that was facing the street, so that would be strategically accurate. If they're going to reinforce one, it would be from the street side. You would think that would be attack from land or something. So that's just a little side note. Had the plane struck anywhere else, the damage and casualties would have been far greater. The area, which was under normal circumstances would occupy 5,000 occupants, only yielded 125 casualties. The damage. The outer wall had a hole approximately 20 feet in diameter. It was like if you looked on the Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner cartoon, and Wile E. Coyote ran through a rock wall, and there'd be an imprint of his silhouette running through the wall. That's what this was. It was a 20-foot hole. But most that whole wall collapsed, I want to say 30 minutes after the attack. So most pictures that are seen are of the whole wall collapsed. It's not of the initial impact hole. Only small pieces of aircraft recovered. There are numerous parts of the 757 that are virtually indestructible, and to date we have not been shown any. And there's roughly an 8-foot diameter Wile E. Coyote style Roadrunner hole on the inner courtyard at the Pentagon. So inside of the Pentagon is not a full building. It actually has the same shape of the outer wall, has a courtyard in the center. On that courtyard wall is an 8-foot hole, and that has never been explained, and nothing came out in the courtyard out of that hole. It was undisturbed. The outer wall collapsed 20 minutes later, creating a 70-foot wide hole. The section hit. What was the section hit? Let's see. It was a headquarters of naval operations, naval intelligence, and command center. And our U.S. military is set up like the old British imperial military, to where Britain was an island. Their main military headquarters is the Navy, and we patterned our military after theirs. So our main branch of the military is the Navy. They have their thumb in everything, special operations, Navy SEALs, and such. So this would have been the branch that knows about everything, all the way from Johnny Deuce and a Half to Islam, getting Osama bin Laden years later. It was also the Accountants and Budget Analysis Office. Arlington County After Action Report magazine states, it was at the end of the fiscal year and important budget information was in the damaged area. Weirdly, 24 hours prior to on September 11th, on the September 10th, 2001, Rumsfeld made this announcement. We cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions in the Department of Defense. We don't know where the money went. So, he promised reform a day earlier, but to his benefit, anybody and everybody that would know anything about that got wiped out on September 11th, a day later. The military was unprepared for commercial airliners to be used as weapons. Is the official statement of the Bush administration, Condoleezza Rice, and that whole administration. To the contrary, though, Marvin Citron, he's a terror forecaster, offered a report in 1994 to the Department of Defense and warned of DC's vulnerability. He predicted a plane could be crashed into the Pentagon. On October 24th, 2000, the Pentagon conducted a mass casualty event of a plane actually hitting the Pentagon. Initial witnesses all wondered where the plane pieces were. Dick was aware, as we talked about in the very end of the last episode, he was aware of the aircraft up to 50 miles away. Why were employees allowed to remain in the building? Norman Mineta, Secretary of Transportation, testified to the 9/11 Commission that about the whole intern coming in telling Dick it's 50 miles out 40 miles out, 10 miles out, and him wielding his head around going, "Have you heard anything to the contrary?" His testimony would be unreported by the press, and it would be unrecorded by the 9/11 Commission. It would also be censored from online archives of Commission hearings. A spokesperson for the National Archives claims that it was a technical snafu. Just a coincidence. The 9/11 Commission would later conclude that Dick Cheney would not reach the bunker until 9:58, after Flight 77 hit the Pentagon. Let's move on. So the Twin Towers. 9:59, the South Tower falls in 10 seconds. 29 minutes later, the North Tower falls in 10 seconds. At 5:20, the World Trade Center 7 collapses. 47 stories tall skyscraper. This will be the third steel frame skyscraper in history completely collapsed due to fire and damage. The first two being the towers that day. And a lot of people don't even know that the third building fell at 5:20, World Trade Center 7. I didn't until years and years after the initial 9/11 attacks. And I consider myself somewhat news savvy, and I never knew about it. It was never really big reported to me. Ask yourselves that if y'all knew that. I didn't. February 23rd, 1991. Meridian Plaza. This is a 38-story skyscraper in Philly. It would burn for 18 hours across 8 floors, later described by officials as the most significant fire of the century. It did not collapse. October 17th, 2004. 56-story skyscraper in Caracas, Venezuela. Built 1976, it burnt for over 17 hours and 26 floors. It did not collapse. February 13th, 1975. A 3-alarm fire broke out between 9th and 14th floor in the North Tower at an electrical junction. The fire was so intense it leads to the installation of sprinkler systems. These would come in handy on May 19th, 1975, a couple of months later, when 7 fires strike the complex of the World Trade Center towers. On the South Tower, it had the garbage fires dispersed between 25th and 36th floors. On the North Tower, on the 11th floor. 6 fires, minor but 7th on the 32nd floor was heavily damaged. So, it did not collapse during those fires. On 9/11, the South Tower, it was the second one hit. North Tower being the first one hit by Flight 11. South Tower burns for 56 minutes over 8 floors and collapses. North Tower burns for 103 minutes over 5 floors. It collapses. Towers were composed of over 200,000 tons of steel, 425,000 cubic yards of concrete, and on average, it's 150 pounds of rebar goes in a cubic yard of concrete. So 425,000 times 150, that's 63,750,000 pounds of rebar. If anybody's in construction, you know what size rebar this is. So imagine a commercial 767 hitting what I just described and taking it down. A single tower is 100,000 tons of structural steel, 160,000 cubic meters of concrete, and so one tower has a mass of 500,000 tons. The core of each tower was a pillar. This was not a traditional steel structure where your steel structure goes all the way to the outside perimeters. This had a core, and then it had an outer, it was a aluminum / metal design. It's later described as like a mosquito netting. So the North Tower is 1,386 feet tall. It was completed in 1970. The South Tower is 1,362 feet tall. It was completed in 1973. The North Tower is the one with the antenna. So it had, let's see, 20 more feet. They were designed to withstand multiple impacts from a Boeing 707. At the time of the creation, it was the largest of the passenger planes. So there was a white paper analysis group on February the 3rd, 1964. They investigated and found to be safe and in an assumed collision with a 707 at 600 miles per hour. Such collision would result in only local damage to the actual collision, but would not signify a collapse of the tower. 707 has 4 engines instead of the 2 that the 767 has, and it has a cruise speed of 607 miles an hour. 767, which struck the north and south towers, were traveling at 440 and 540 miles per hour. The fall. The initial witnesses sounded like 100 firecrackers being lit all at once. Looks like planned implosions. Looks like a demolition team did it. By the evening, officials were rushing to push a narrative of raging jet fuel fires melted the steel. Frank D. Martini, he was the manager of the World Trade Center Construction Project Management. He recorded an interview January 25th, 2001. And he's been missing since 9/11, 2001. He says in this interview, I believe the building could sustain multiple impacts because this structure is like the mosquito net on your front door. This intense grid. And the jet plane would be like a pencil punching through the mosquito netting. John Skilling, he's a structural engineer for World Trade Center, told Seattle Times in an interview after the 93 bombing that if a plane struck the building, there would be a horrendous fire, but the building structure would still be there. So on August 21st, 2002, the National Institute of Standard and Technology, NIST, this is a government agency that reports back to the Department of Commerce, started their investigation. It was headed by Donald Evans and later replaced by Carlos Gutierrez. They contracted Underwriters Laboratory. You see UL on everything, on light bulbs. They do all kinds of stuff. So it's not your mom and pop contractor investigating this for NIST. They constructed floor models of the World Trade Center for the purpose of fire resistance test. So they took the exact floors of the initial impacts and they reconstructed these whole floors, okay? This was with the pipes, with the insulation, everything. Kevin Ryan, former manager of UL, says that they were exposed to higher temperatures and longer times with no melting occurring. On August the 4th, NIST's final report, October 26, 2005, is 10,000 pages long. It will not explain the actual collapse of the buildings. It just says that the collapses were inevitable. And that is chapter 6, page 82. So, we look at Newton's law. That is the distance times 2 divided by gravity. And you look at what free fall speed is, and if you took the height of the Twin Towers, 1,382, and divided that, and multiply that times 2, and divided by 32, you'd have 9.2 seconds. So those towers collapsed at free fall speed. So we have another structural engineer, Gordon Ross. He's commenting on these free fall speeds. This is called the conservation of momentum. If heating that was supposed to have caused the failure would have been a much slower event. So he's saying if the jet fuels would have melted the steel beams that, if that were even possible, which it's not, that the collapse would have been a much slower event than free fall speed. So it would have been an asymmetric event. For the tower collapse straight down onto itself flies into the face of what we know about steel and the way steel behaves. When you have a failure in one area, then the failure tends to continue within that one area. So if you have one corner of the building failing, it's going to continue failing in this corner, which would actually cause a tipping over. And that would be, and he said, seeing an asymmetric collapse. Seeing the upper section possibly falling off and away from itself. But it's very unusual to see the upper section falling straight through the path of greatest resistance. So, according to the official story, all four corners of this building would have had to collapse at the same time for it to fall straight down. So, let's look at the degrees. So there were, according to satellite imagery at the time, 2,000 plus degrees Fahrenheit of molten metal is in the rubble at ground zero. You can actually see clips of workers at ground zero with excavators, and they have their skid buckets and molten steel is falling out of them. This 2,000 plus degree Fahrenheit molten metal in the rubble, it consisted, even with a constant stream of flame retardants and water from the nearby river, creating a giant lake. These fires would not be extinguished until December the 13th, 2001, making it the longest burning structural fire in history. So, Frank Gale, he's a metal expert, on the February 7, 2004. He's doing an interview with ABC 7. Your gut reaction would be that the jet fuel is what made the fire so intense. A lot of people figured that's what melted the steel. Indeed, it did not. The steel did not melt. The temperatures that we know existed within the debris pile is physically impossible to achieve with an atmospheric jet fuel fire. Gordon Ross, this is another structural engineer guy. He says that these temperatures, they figured out these temperatures from satellite thermal imagery. These satellites were made for watching volcanoes and stuff like that at the time, and out of curiosity, they put it on ground zero and got these numbers. So, what happened when it fell? A pyroclastic dust cloud. If anybody's seen any footage of it, these people are, the tower collapses and all of a sudden it comes around the corner, a huge wind of gray dust. That's a pyroclastic dust cloud. How do you achieve these pyroclastic dust clouds? They're achieved from volcanoes and controlled demolitions. So, another anomaly, steel beams weighing 200,000 pounds were thrown laterally up to 500 feet away. Whenever I'm not a mystery rancher, I am a crane operator, and I've had to pick up molten pots at Nucor that weigh 200,000 pounds with my crane, with actually a dual pick. So I'm picking up one side and another crane's picking up the other side, and that's all they can do is pick it up. And I mean, this is a lot of metal, and I'm imagining this being thrown laterally 500 feet. I can't even imagine the force that would be able to do that. A cross section from the World Trade Center weighing 300 tons, 600,000 pounds, was embedded in the southeast corner of American Express building. This piece would have had to have traveled at least 390 feet and still retain enough kinetic energy to embed itself into the side of this building. So, back to the debris pile. This is Gordon Ross commenting again. What we should have seen in the debris pile is a pyramidal shape. What we did see is a massive ejection of dust and debris in large sections of steel thrown well away from the towers. So, firefighters, emergency workers, police, and witnesses reported a large series of explosions before collapse. So the aftermath. What did we do with all this steel? Well, it was immediately shipped overseas, eliminating any analysis. 4 companies contracted for the debris removal. Each is assigned specific zones. Each dump truck had a GPS locator installed on it to know that it was not straying off course. One driver actually took an extended lunch break with his load, and he was fired because that's how serious they were taking it. By April 2002, 185,000 tons were removed. So FEMA's building performance assessment team was not even allowed access to Ground Zero. They were offered a tour in October 2001, but forbidden in taking in any samples or even examining the blueprints. When the towers came down, they released over 500 tons of pulverized asbestos, lead, barium, mercury, chromium, copper, and other toxic chemicals. 425,000 cubic feet of concrete was pulverized in an instant. 600,000 square feet of glass turned into dust in an instant. Asbestos was outlawed in 1971. The North Tower already had it in it. So they ceased asbestos fire retardant on the 64th floor of the South Tower. So in 1989, the Port Authority is expected to pay $1 billion in abatement cleanup. But whenever these towers fell and all this went into the atmosphere, everybody was encouraged or urged to go back to work. EPA was told by the White House on September 18, 2001, that the air was safe to breathe. So 500,000 tons of ash were taken to the Fresh Kills landfill, where they contain 1,148 victims that have yet to be identified. Bloomberg repeatedly denies families' requests of going and visiting the Fresh Kills landfill, replying, "I've only visited my father's grave once." So, 1,148 victims are basically turned to bone fragments. 300 bone fragments were discovered April 14, 2006 on the Deutsche Bank roof. Let's move on to Shanksville, Pennsylvania. 10:03 a.m., Flight 93 plows into the abandoned strip mine at 580 miles per hour. The official story is passengers overthrew the hijackers. There's a 3 to 4 mile radius of debris field, but we were told it went straight down into the ground. If y'all ever seen footage of that, there's workers actually going, because there's no plane there. We were told it went straight into the thing, but there's a 3 to 4 mile radius around this hole of a debris field. Only phone book sized pieces were found. The second debris site was found 6 miles away. Every witness remarks how little of a plane was not there. So, is there any precedent of plane disintegrating after impact? In May 1979, we have American Airlines 191 is a crash, and it's left on the ground, 90% of it. Pan Am 103 in December 1988 has a similar crash. It's left. TW8 800 in July 1996. It's left. So, evidence that's presented at the 2006 trials of the Flight 93 hijacking. The evidence they have a red bandana. So I'm guessing of one of the hijackers was found. A Kingdom of Saudi Arabia driver's license. And then we have a John M. Taligmani, Florida driver's license, and a C.C. Ross Lyles, Florida license. And I think she was a stewardess. So, let's move on to World Trade Center 7. 1984 was groundbreaking. It's 570 feet tall, 48 stories. Its offices include the Department of Defense, Security and Exchange Commission, the IRS. It's considered CIA's largest field station outside of D.C. It is the biggest field office of the Secret Service. June the 8th, 1999, Mayor Giuliani's Office of Emergency Command Center is opened on the 23rd floor. And it is reinforced with bomb-proof and blast-proof windows. And it has actually an independent air supply. World Trade Center 7, the fire alarm system placed on test for 8 hours at the beginning at 6:47 a.m. on 9/11. So there were fires on the east face between the 11th and the 12th floor. The north face of the building, 7th and 12th floor. West face of the building, 29th and 30th floor. South face, you can't really tell because smoke is obscuring the entire south face of the building. So by 3 p.m., Chief Daniel Nygrum had set up a collapse zone. And at 5:20, World Trade Center 7 goes down to 6.5 seconds. So, that concludes the documentary movie review called Loose Change on the events of 9/11. And just going through them, there's a lot of inconsistencies. And I really don't know what to think about it, but I know the official story doesn't really ring true. And that's what we're bringing up to let everybody reflect on. And we'll be doing some other 9/11 episodes of other anomalies, but the Loose Change documentary is a really good documentary exposing what the storyline, official storyline of the 9/11 Commission says as opposed to what really happened. Anyways, we hope y'all enjoyed this part 2 of the Loose Change documentary, and we will see y'all on the next video. Thank you.